All right, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for coming today. I know it's a difficult day to get out here with the weather. And so we really appreciate filling the house like we did. And so we're here today to talk about, we talked about making business personal. And I think the one thing that I've heard a lot of in just talking with people in this room and talking with people this week is really about the idea of, does social, and more specifically Facebook, drive business results? And the feedback that we get a lot is we don't want to hear it from Facebook. We want to hear it from the marketers and the brands that are achieving those results, and we want to understand a little bit more about how they're doing it. So the focus today is really going to be not to hear from Facebook, really to hear from some of the leading brands and some of the executives of those brands on what they're doing that's working, and if it's driving the business results that they had hoped. So just by way of introduction, actually before we get to introductions, just to understand who's in the audience today. If you're from an agency, can you just put your hand up? A lot of agency folks, great. And if you're from a brand or you work at a direct client, can you put your hand up? Okay, perfect. So kind of a split room, which is great, because I think we're going to hear both angles on that today, and hopefully we get some good learnings. So just to introduce the panel that's with me here today, on our far right is Duncan Fulton. He's the Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications and the CMO at FGL Sports. We've got Emmie Fukuchi, who's the AVP of Digital and New Media at Air Miles Reward Program, and Yona Shtern, who is the co-founder and CEO of Beyond the Rack. And so where I thought we'd start today is to talk about ROI. So we've heard a lot about, probably one of the most important talks of 2012 is, where's the ROI? Does social deliver ROI? When you think about Facebook or Twitter, a lot of the new kind of social networks, is this just a fad? Is this something that we're doing because we're experimenting? Or are we starting to see real business results? And so maybe what we'll do is we'll just spend a couple minutes with each of you just talking about the experience that you've had. All of you have had great 2012. Just talk about some of the success that you've seen. And maybe we'll start with you, Duncan, on the social flyer. You can tell us just a little bit about kind of how you're reinventing the flyer at SportCheck.
Yeah, you bet. When you look at retail, flyers are like the crack cocaine of retail, eh? Because, for decades, retailers have been using them. And so you have years and years and years of data. So on the front of a flyer in week 27, that top left box is going to produce 220,000 units. So you can actually optimize your flyer, and there's like hundreds of people that sit and work on flyer optimization. And that's good for Canadian Tire, right, where we spend $110 million a year on flyers. It's the most read paper in the country. Not so good when you get into SportCheck, because at SportCheck, 80% of the customer base is under the age of 45. We did a lot of research and saw only about 30% of that customer base was reading the flyer on a regular basis. So we do know that if you actually pull a flyer from a week, sales go down that week, comping on the year before. So it's not that you might not lose something. There's an opportunity to gain with all that customer base that's actually not reading your flyer. Then the issue is you got to actually shift investment from other marketing channels like the print flyer into digital. And you got C-suites that are filled with older people that just completely freak out at the notion of social media, right? And they can't see the ROI in it. So we said at Check, number one, we know for a fact who our customer is. We know for a fact they're not reading the flyer. And we know for a fact that we have a chief merchandising officer that will have a breakdown if we pull a single page from the flyer. So we had to find a way to get at it. So we actually did a net new investment, but we knew we had to measure everything. So we went and we hired 2 analytics folks, like this is your classic Jonah Hill Moneyball type folks. And the first thing that we had them do was a very unanalytical thing, which is learn how to use the finance system. Because finance never prioritizes marketing. So you ask for sales data down to a SKU level, you never get it. So these guys learned how to use the system and now can pull by themselves sales on any single item or a group of items. They can manipulate the system however they want. So then we said, okay, we need to build what we started calling the social flyer. And we worked with Steve and folks from Facebook New York, and we actually built an app, a tremendous app that quasi-failed when we launched it because all of the different partners we had involved in the app didn't keep Facebook in the loop as we went along. So one of the big learnings we had was launching a custom app on Facebook that's not custom built for Facebook is a disaster. And so as we were freaking out a little bit about how to fix that, because the thesis was still bang on, you got to be able to reach your customer. We said, while we're fixing that, and we are fixing it, let's just start doing tactical advertising. So we know that brand on Facebook and getting more friends on Facebook, we've gone from 60,000 likes to 660,000 likes in about a year. We're beginning to activate that group on Facebook. So that part was good, but actually having a single vest, being able to sell more vests and measure that was hard. So what we did is we looked ahead a number of weeks. We picked all the items that we were going to promote in social, effectively social advertising on Facebook, using the social graph and using networks in order to churn and promote the items. And we started a baseline with our money balls. So they did weeks and weeks and weeks of baseline data. How many vests are you selling in the GTA and outside of the GTA? And by the time we got to the actual test period, which was a 7-week period, we knew exactly what the baseline would be against all of those items that we were going to sell. And we knew that when we promoted it, it would go up this much and go down this much in normal print advertising. So then we spent about $250,000 in 7 weeks, exclusively focused in the GTA, exclusively targeted to 18 to 34-year-olds on those same items that we've been tracking. And we managed to isolate a net incremental sales of $368,000 off the $250,000 spend. Now, some weeks, it was a true positive ROI, i.e. the actual profit from that vest exceeded the money we spent. Other weeks, it was a little bit lower. But we proved to ourselves in the fall that it is actually possible to target and sell on Facebook and be able to measure it and show it. And interestingly, at the same time, we put in place a whole new measurement process on the paper flyer. So just a couple of weeks ago, as we were planning all of 2013, and the merchandise guys said, we want more money for paper flyers. And I started talking about digital flyer. They said, yeah, well, that's just one test, that's just one test. And I held up 12 paper flyers, and I said, every one of these had a negative ROI. Every one of these cost $450,000 a piece to put out. So you've just gone and wasted $4.8 million. We invested $250,000. So we're going to shift money. It's just going to be the way it is. So we are going to this year continue to shift money into digital and into social because we are, I think, very close to being able to consistently get that positive ROI week to week. The only big challenge I think that still exists, and we'll debate it a bit today, is we're finding customers are very protective of their news feeds. We're also finding the news feeds are absolutely tremendous in terms of delivering ROI. So finding that right balance between communicating with people where they're going to see it and do something with it versus pissing them off is certainly something we're going to look at in 2013.
That's great. And it's interesting, and one of the things that Duncan talked about, which I think is a really important point, is that we see quite a bit is this idea of people jumping into apps as a first opportunity on Facebook without really building up the fan base and getting the engagement. And I think what your team has done an amazing job at is being able to show that sometimes the simplest tactics are the best on Facebook. Getting the right offer that already goes in a flyer out to millions of people, out to 12 million people on Facebook, and just showing and exposing that offer to them sometimes is enough to be able to drive the sales into the store, which has been great. And I know that, just to pivot over to you, Emmie, for a second, we've talked a lot now about ROI, and obviously Air Miles is an unbelievable company. You track ROI on, everything. And the analytics group that you have is probably one of the strongest in the world. And so maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how you think about ROI. We know that Air Miles doesn't move forward with anything without at least having a way to measure it. And so, and how have you seen in terms of the impact that that's had on the business?
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So measurement, you're absolutely right, is very, very important to our business. And Air Miles, at its roots, is a loyalty program. So we're looking to impact customer behavior for our retail sponsors and as well as add value to the consumers. Social is something that we are big believers in and have been for many, many years. We started our first activities in social back in probably 2007, 2008. And along the way, as Steve says, we do measure and evaluate what is the impact of the things we do. So in our early days, we actually had launched a community site on our website. And then as Facebook grew and started to introduce more and more solutions for businesses, we migrated over to that. And our learnings from that is that the great thing about Facebook is it enables us to go to where the consumers are. So we were able to get much bigger volumes in terms of consumer interactions through Facebook than we were in the early days of our own community. It was earlier in social, but the consumer had to come to us versus us integrating into the way they use it. You know, they use social in their own lives. So that was a big win for us. And then in terms of measuring ROI, we do take a look at what happens when consumers engage with us for the first time through any new interaction. And so we'll do this analysis for the first time they visit our website or the first time they start using email. And the same thing applies to social. So when they start engaging through us as a fan or previously with our own social community site, we take a look at what happens to their transactional behavior through the entire coalition of the Air Miles partners. And this slide that Steve has pulled up here for us shows that when we take a look at a baseline of collectors and look at a similar baseline, we look at their pre-post behavior. The dotted line identifies when someone starts to engage with us through Facebook, and we see a lift in their transactional behavior at all of our partners. And this translates directly back to sales in the similar ways as we're measuring it through Sports Check as well. For us, overall, in the early days of this analysis, it's about a 6% lift across our segments. And that varies from 2% on our most engaged consumer, the people who are already almost maximized out in the program, but we can still get a little bit of lift from them, to as high as 8 or 9% amongst consumers who are less engaged in the program. And this is really, for Facebook, this is our initial analysis on this. We're now starting to look in a deeper dive and look at more concrete analysis around historically what's happened when people have engaged, when they become a fan or when they've been exposed through friends of fans. You know, what is the difference in impact from a direct fan versus a connection? What type of contact within Facebook, within the Facebook environment will drive the best results? So we're hoping to get a lot of insight that can help us understand how to maximize the value that we can get back out of our investment in Facebook, as well as learnings that can help contribute to the overall best practices around optimizing the use for ROI within the industry.
That's great. I love this slide, by the way. I'd love to keep this up the whole time. And Yona, over to you. So when we think about, obviously we're thinking about a lot of more traditional kind of transactional stuff in store. Your business is all online and obviously a different business. And for anybody who doesn't know Beyond the Rack, if my wife is any proxy, you guys are doing really well. It's one of the best and top e-commerce sites in Canada, and really a great representation of what we can do in Canada globally. How have you been using Facebook? Because obviously it's slightly different probably than the first two panelists. How do you think about Facebook playing a role for you?
Well, I think you take a step back and you think about the nature of our business model. And ROI are my three favorite letters put together. And our entire business, really, when we look at our business, we think of our business as an equation, as a mathematical equation. We happen to be selling, everything from Louboutin shoes to bed sheets, but we could be selling anything. And at our core, we look at our members. So we've attracted about 8.5 million members between Canada and the United States. We look at each one of those relationships as a small equation. And those equations add up and form our business model. So when we think about how do we acquire 8.5 million members? So we're acquiring about 250,000 new members a month. I mean, compared to Facebook numbers, we're a tiny little dwarf. But our community is all made up of shoppers. So we're a very concentrated group of really common-minded women. I was going to say individuals, but really women. We love you. We know you love shoes. We love you. And the thing is, when you're looking for people like that, really at the core, the equation is relatively simple. You look at the cost of acquiring a cohort of members, and then you measure that cohort of members over a period of time, and you measure the lifetime value. So for example, the way we look at every single channel, and Facebook is no exception, is let's say we were able to acquire, I don't know, 10,000 Facebook members through Facebook in a particular month, and we had to ascribe a cost of, say, $3 for each one, so it cost us $30,000. We'll watch the dollars that we generate at the contribution level, how those guys did in the first month of acquisition, second month following acquisition, third month following acquisition, and you start to see these little curves. And then you can then do a very quick calculation and figure out, well, how many months did it take me to pay back the cost of acquisition, and how long does the lifetime value curve last? And that's the way we look at it. And the reason we continue to spend more and more time and energy on Facebook as a channel is because Facebook needs to rank versus 80 other different acquisition channels that are part of our overall mix. The good news for us is social is growing in importance because it combines really the two most important qualities. The overall cost is reasonable. The payback is really good, so we see a great degree of engagement because of the social nature, and there's scale. So it's great to have a channel that delivers 1 and 2, but if it doesn't scale, then you're really not really accomplishing much. So our primary use of Facebook really has been as an acquisition channel. We've done a lot to try to optimize the acquisition. We did a lot of really silly things at the beginning, like we would do a campaign on Facebook and we wouldn't allow anybody to sign up with their Facebook ID. That's pretty stupid. And you change that and you realize, oh, I just got a 20% lift in the effectiveness of my Facebook program simply because I'm leveraging the way people actually want to use it. The second way we use it is as a retention vehicle. We email, so for those of you who are members, apologies, but we email about 3.5 billion times a year. So we send a lot of emails. It's the primary way that we generate activity on our website. 75% of the revenue we generate are for people who've bought from us in the past. So we have a highly engaged membership base. Clearly, if we could crack the code of leveraging Facebook as a means to amplify the message that we're already broadcasting through email, which is really a low-impact medium, but our most successful medium, it's of great value. And we're spending a lot of time and energy with the Facebook team trying to figure out how does email work as a complement to Facebook. And I think we're starting to see some really exciting results. And so we're really pumped.
That's great. And so one of the things that and Duncan, you touched on it a little bit, and I know that I think it was about a year ago, you did a presentation that I sat in on around selling to the C-suite. And I thought there were some great nuggets from that, but I think it's an interesting challenge because what we hear a lot is, well, this is great. We start to get some case studies, which I think are starting to come out now, where we're seeing more and more companies that are starting to deliver ROI. But Facebook is still relatively new. A lot of the C-suite might not be on Facebook, so they don't understand it the way that we do. Being a member of the C-suite now and having sold into the C-suite before, how do you think about that challenge, and how have you been able to position Facebook the way you have to be able to get the results, or even the permission to be able to do the things that you've done?
I think a lot of it is giving context to the C-suite. So to generalize, the C-suite is filled with people in their late 40s, 50s, or 60s that grew up with radio, TV, maybe movies, flyers, paper advertising as the principal forms of advertising. The C-suite, generally speaking, are people that worked harder than most of their peers, took risks, but also always made sure they paid off. They were extremely ROI focused their entire life. By and large, they were wildly offended at the dot-com bubble because they couldn't grasp that a 19-year-old kid with a beanbag chair on the West Coast could be worth $20 million in 7 weeks, right? Like, it's just offensive when you spent 20 years of your life trying to get into the C-suite. And they kind of liked it when it blew up, right? And they're like, well, there you go. That's what you don't get anything quick and easy, right? So then people bring to them and say, hey, we need more friends on Facebook. And especially kind of post-recession, when everyone is just whacking OpEx out of the P&L. They're saying, show me how this makes me money. So we started changing the conversation in the C-suite, saying, let's talk about what's happening, right? This is just, if you leave aside as a selling tool, just as people talking about your brand, if you care about your brand, then you care about what people say about it. If you're the CEO and you're in line at Tim Hortons, and as you're standing there, there's people at a table beside you trashing your brand. As a CEO, do you sit down and engage that customer, or do you ignore it and you keep going? Any good CEO or C-suite would actually stop and engage the table beside them and say, my God, like, I can't believe you've had this bad experience with my brand. How can I help, right? You probably wouldn't say, hey, I overheard you talking about me. Can I sell you a ratchet set, right? So when the C-suite goes, how do I sell this thing? You got to get them past that to say you're engaging in a conversation. And if you would stop at Tim Hortons and engage a customer, then you should be stopping online. So you've got millions of people engaging your brand in conversation online. And if you're not there, you can't interact with it.
Yeah, that's great. And, Emmie, Yona, anything to add to that? Any experiences? Obviously, Yona, you had to be sold on this to get it going. Emmie, you had to do probably quite a bit of work knowing the organization to be able to, get them interested. Is it a similar experience or something different?
Absolutely. I really love the profile you created of the C-suite. I think it's, on the whole, quite accurate. In our case, we had the benefit of, I think, a bit more digital savviness. So it was an easier job for us as a result of that. We had people we were selling through to that had more exposure, probably, I think, than the average, and certainly than the average of our clients' executive suites. And so they were more on side, but like you as well, the conversation was much more about I think one of the things we said so often was that our consumers are actually already talking about us out there in the social sphere. And so it's up to us to join that conversation and influence the conversation. And there were some great case studies. I remember Dell and exploding laptops as an early case study about being able to influence the conversation from negative to positive. And we used examples like that, and we showed examples where we had had those types of experiences. We also showed examples where we did trial balloons out into the social space. We did tests, and we did it off our own core site so that we could put it up and take it down at a low risk. And we were able to gauge what type of response we would see from consumers fairly early on. It was promotional, so it was time limited. And those, I think, really helped to reduce some of the concerns that existed. We saw that the vast majority of the commentary, there's a lot of concerns in early days about, is it all going to be negative commentary? And, there were stats around 85, 86% tends to be positive. And I would say our early days experience echoed that as well. And yet, there's still going to be comments and feedback as well from consumers, and your ability to get into that conversation and influence it, I think, was the biggest driver around selling that through and demonstrating that we can do it in a positive and low-risk way to the brand.
Sure.
As a company, we've always tried to nurture a very inclusive and very accepting philosophy towards failure. I'm not trying to couch Facebook in the context of failure, but really more in the context of testing. I think I use the analogy all the time when I speak to either marketing classes or even internally to our own marketing people, the concept of sonar, as sonar is used to guide a missile or a torpedo that comes out of a submarine. So when a torpedo is launched out of a submarine and it's going towards a boat, if at any given point in time that torpedo effectively is off course. But what sonar does is sonar allows it to recalibrate 1,000 times before it finally hits its target. So it's kind of like a fish going through water, but every single moment it's going in the wrong direction. So we kind of taken that philosophy and we've applied it to marketing testing. So at the very beginning, when we had absolutely no money, our philosophy was we'll test anything for $5,000 as long as it's scalable and it's measurable and it's repeatable. And we had this intuitive sense that Facebook was probably worth more than a $5,000 bet because the early results were not that great. But that's because we didn't know what we were doing. But the delta between knowing what you're doing and not knowing what you're doing usually is screwing up a lot of times. That's the delta between a great pianist and a crappy pianist, a great hockey player and a crappy hockey player. It's practice, and it's a lot of failure along the way. But the failure becomes more marginalized over time, and I think that's been our experience with Facebook too. And one of the reasons that we really gravitated to it as a platform was that it was a platform that allowed us to do a lot of testing. And so the early results were like, oh my God, this is never going to work. But at the risk of mentioning Google was the same thing. It was a disaster for us at the beginning. But it was both of them were platforms that allowed us to do a lot of testing and ultimately end up with a formula that worked for us. So
yeah, that's great. So we've got a lot of agency folks in a room, and I've spent a lot of time with agencies over the last couple of years, and when we go out and we have conversations a lot, there seems to be a lot of concern about what's the future of agencies. We've got agencies kind of now that are starting to become integrated agencies, where the media agency is taking on more of the strategy. We've got creative agencies that are now taking on more of the media, and just curious to get your take on the role of the agencies for you. Have they been doing a good job for you? Are these agency-led projects? Are these client-led projects? And kind of the follow-up to that would be, if they're not doing the job that you want them to do, what should they be doing that they're not doing?
I'll roll social into all of digital for a minute, just because digital is so complex today. We just launched a new store on the weekend up on Yonge Street, hands down the most digitally advanced retail space in North America. 140 screens, 70 different custom channels of content, 5.5 kilometers of fiber in there, 6.5 kilometers of Cat6. We're running. Anyway, people should have a look at it. It's kind of cool, but in building that, like the amount of nightmares that we came across, the way I'll describe it is like this. I think companies have to become their own general contractors. So if you're getting your house redone, you're going to bring your floor guy in to do your floors, and he's probably the best floor guy in the business. But while he's there, he's going to say, I see your walls need to be done. I also do walls. Now, he's probably not the best wall guy in the business, but he does technically do walls, right? And he has a cousin that does pot lights, right? and before you know it, you have this suite of contractors in your house that are average at best, because really the only thing that they were ever truly great at was the floor, right? But you don't know where to go find your wall guy. And right now, and I was an agency for 8 years, and I did it. Like, you want to get the business, right? And if you're slightly good at something, you don't tell clients you're slightly good at it. You say, I'm great at it, right? But agencies that portray themselves to be the soup to nuts expert in digital, I've not yet met one. Can't find one. There are horses for courses all the way through the different parts of digital and social. And the trick is learning who's real and who's not, who is on the cutting edge and who's not. And in a way, becoming your own general contractor. We, at Czech, so much of our future is going to be digital and social, that we created one full-time position, which is Erica down here in the front row, Erica de Haas. Her entire job is only working on things that are 6 to 18 months out in digital, in marketing. It's her full-time job. She's not allowed to touch things that are being executed today, and everything is next in class. And part of that, you quickly begin to figure out who's the real deal and who claims that they're experts at everything. So I think there are agencies that are terrific at different pieces, and too many agencies that claim to be the expert at everything.
Any commentary, Emmie?
Similar perspective, I think. So we have a very diversified agency matrix as well for digital. And then when you look across the marketing suite, is even more so. And I think in the social space in particular, so one question you asked, Steve, is it client-led? So we have led our direction and our strategy, and we've looked to complement our expertise with different agency partners along the way. And over the years on social, it has been actually a number of different agency partners. And I think what is a result of that, what is a cause of that, is that we have not found someone who is an expert in soup to nuts social. So we'll have a different partner in early days on strategy, a different partner on technology, a different partner on design, analytics, and it means for a very diversified and not well optimized, I think, agency partnership model for us. And so I think we could benefit from having a relationship that, at least for the one element of social as part of the digital mix, that someone could bring the whole story together with expertise across all of those elements, from strategy to analytics. And there's different players and there's different technologies. There's so many different solutions out there in the marketplace. And I think so many people are constantly bombarded with people who think they have the next greatest and greatest thing in social, if not in digital more broadly. And so our lives could be simplified if we could find someone who could help us soup to nuts along the way and really bring expertise through all of those facets. That may be hard to deliver. We have found that different people have different strengths and expertise in the different areas, but that would be a benefit for us as a client for sure.
Yeah, I think most of our digital work is done internally, but even a company like ours, we have leveraged, particularly on the social side, some outside expertise, where we were able to identify somebody who'd done it well beyond our own capacity, and people who had demonstrated that, in most cases, they had done it for competitors. So, in fact, on the social side, we brought in a group of freelancers. Wasn't really technically an agency, but guys who really knew their way around. And we always look kindly upon people, particularly in our space, being so ROI focused, who are willing to work for a percentage of what they bring to the table. We always look very favorably upon that. So such was the case with the guys who were helping us on the social side. They said, we won't take a fee, so I guess I'm not offending the agency folks here. We'll take a percentage of the lift that we provide in your K factor. So the percentage of invites that your own members are generating. And they lifted our K factor by 50%. So, I mean, for us, it was probably, the work they did was probably worth $30 million. We didn't pay him $30 million bucks, but we wouldn't have got there on our own. We just simply didn't have the expertise. But these were guys that this is all that they did. And I would agree, on the digital side, there's so many different skill sets. Somebody who's really good at SEM is not going to be the expert in SEO, and is not going to be the expert in metadata or building UIX or social. Those are highly specialized skills. You're not going to go to a pediatrician to take out your gallbladder. Find the right doctor, and it's the same thing on the digital side. Find the guy who has the expertise.
So it really sounds like more of a push towards specializing and talking more about the things that you do well as a takeaway, versus trying to go and say, we can make it easy for you, we can take it all in-house, we can make it like a one-stop shop. Is that fair? What about mobile is always a hot topic. We could probably be sitting on this stage any one of the last 10 years and talk about it being the year of mobile. I think we're starting to see more evidence now. 54% smartphone penetration now. We've got 11 million monthly active users on their mobile phone and Facebook in Canada. And so we're starting to hit these levels where it's starting to become a really significant opportunity for your business today, not tomorrow. And so as you think about mobile and the role of mobile 2013 and moving on, gut check, is it real? Like, is it here? And if it is, what are you doing about it?
I think, so mobile is huge. Very few people do it well. I think if you focus on mobile in 2013, you're missing that multi-screen strategy which you need, because now mobile is just a piece of it, right? So I was saying to the team the other day, if you can deliver a $12 pizza for $5 with a delivery car, if you break your hockey stick at a rink, why can't you take your phone out and order a new stick and have Czech deliver one within 30 minutes? You should be able to do that. But equally, you should be able to sit in front of your new smart TV, have it take a picture of you, pull up all of the Adidas shirts that we have in an endless aisle assortment, and just kind of swipe the shirts across the screen with your hand, find the one you like and buy it, right? There should be a different role for your tablet. So I think mobile increasingly is going to be huge. People are going to have to get great at it. But I think it's part of a multi-screen play. I think if you just focus on mobile, you'll wake up in 18 months and already be behind again.
Yeah, I'd very much agree with that as well, Duncan. I think that, so I think mobile is here today. We are certainly seeing significant volumes through the mobile channel for ourselves, have had great success with our mobile app, nearing 700,000 downloads of that, and a lot of great activity, millions of check-ins through it. So it's definitely impacting our business today. We're seeing more and more people interact with us through multiple devices coming from a mobile device. But it is very much as well multi-channel. Email by no means is anywhere near dead for us. It's a very alive and thriving channel for us. Our digital website property, very critical. And so it's part of an overall digital mix, which is part of a broader marketing mix. And the shifting marketing mix is probably more so what's happening today. It's shifting and optimizing, and it's becoming, the word omni-channel, being able to respond to whatever device the user is using and putting the right content in the right format in the right way in front of them. And mobile will play, an increasingly large role in that. And what mobile is as well even just so diverse, ranging from an iPad to, some people are still using SMS feature phones. So it's a very diverse market as well, and it's a challenge to optimize to all different users within that base. And we are thinking about shifting how we actually serve content up so that it can be served up in a much more dynamic format to be more responsive to the type of device the user is using in that channel.
Yeah.
Well, our challenge is that we're transactional online. And so our reality is, it confuses me all the time because they blur tablets into mobile. If you ask me, I don't think a tablet's a mobile device because tablets are really replacing desktops. So for personal use. So once you put the tablet number in there, it makes mobile look a lot, just from our point of view, looks a lot better than it really is. We get a lot of traffic off of mobile devices, but transactionally, but tablets, even before we optimized for the tablet experience, and we're not fully optimized, but I'd say we're 50% of the way there. We do have a tablet optimized website, but it's not perfect. We did see a lift, but even before that, transactional conversion rates for an e-commerce site, they were always better on tablets than they were on desktops even. But mobile devices, we're there. It's 40% of our traffic, so that's a mind-numbing, last year was 18, so there's a tsunami coming. Yeah, you kind of have to be there. But I don't know that anybody, certainly on the transactional side, has truly figured out how to get somebody to order at the same rate off of an iPod or an iPhone as you do off of a tablet. Tablets are awesome. I wish everybody had a tablet.
And Steve, maybe just add one more thing. Yeah. Everyone that's running to make their website mobile friendly should almost just stop and skip ahead to what has to be true about my brand and the experience I want to give to somebody when they're truly mobile versus sitting at home and they have time to do things, right? So you look at Ali Arsari at well.ca, right? He's got a great site, but his mobile application says if you're in your bathroom, you run out of hairspray. The mobile app is so easy because you say, really what that's for is to scan the barcode of the hairspray so you can get new hairspray delivered tomorrow. It's not a fully searchable website necessarily. So mobile has to play a function. It's not just take an entire website and make it easier to navigate on a phone.
Yeah, well said. So we're going to get into questions in a second. Before we do that, we're going to have a little bit of fun with some rapid fire questions. So here's the ground rules on this. No disclaimers and no description afterward. Just like yes, no, one-word answers, and we're going to try to move through it fast, and we'll just go along. Yona, Emmie, Duncan. You ready for this? Mm-hmm. All right. Favorite mobile app?
I think well.ca.
BBM.
Anything unlocking augmented reality.
All right. I don't know if that was one word, but I like that. Branding. Overvalued or undervalued?
Both. Just be consistent.
Both, depending on the brand.
I think most people undervalue it. It's more important than they think.
First website you visit every morning?
Either TSN or NHL.com. We got Subban back.
It depends where my emails take me.
Globe to go.
All right. Where do you go for more relevant information these days? Newspaper or newsfeed?
Are they still publishing newspapers? I don't know. I don't get it. I wouldn't even know where to get. You can get one from Air Canada. If you go to the lounge at Pearson, you get a newspaper.
Newsfeed.
Newsfeed.
Favorite brand on Facebook other than your own?
Probably Shoe Dazzle.
I like Beyond the Rack.
Thank you.
You took my answer. I was going to say Beyond the Rack. It's great.
$50 credits.
Shameless plugs out there. I don't know.
Life like shoes too.
If you had to move all of your budget this year into one channel, what would it be?
Okay, you're going to think I'm a suck. But really, it would be social. It pays. It really, really pays.
We're going to hold you to that. Emmie?
Digital, that's a channel overall.
I would say smart TVs where you can access social.
Okay. Content is king or context is king?
Context, 100%, no question.
Context.
I'm going to go content.
I like disagreement. iOS or Android?
Both. No BlackBerry? Come on, that BlackBerry 10's launching.
Both have had to choose iOS.
iOS.
And one thing you would not post on your Facebook profile?
Okay, I'm going to embarrass myself yet again. I don't have a Facebook profile. I'm too old. My kids have Facebook, okay? BBM.
Just when it gets too personal.
Yeah, I would say any location of where my kids are. I just don't want that out.
I never thought in 2013 I would be doing blank.
I didn't think I'd be running this company. No chance.
Raising twins.
You knew you were going to do it?
I don't know. I think from a digital point of view, I think I have higher expectations for 2013. I think we probably should have been where we are a year or two ago overall in digital.
All right. Consumers today want more blank.
Transparency.
Value.
Decision-making authority.
I've unfriended at least one person on Facebook. I guess we'll skip you on
I never friended him.
by extension.
I've wanted to.
Ex-girlfriend back in
That's why I'm not on Facebook.
In marketing, 2013 is going to be the year of blank.
I think data will finally drive more decisions.
I mean,
Behavioral insight driving decisions.
Smart commerce, more than e-commerce.
and last one, more likely to happen in our lifetime. Cars in the air, like we see in all the futuristic movies, or the Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. It's going to be an easy one for you, yeah?
Well, I hope cars in the air.
Cars in the air.
Cars.
It's scary.
Sadly.
It's a sad, sad state of affairs, but that's the consensus answer.
The good news is you'll always have the Canadians to beat. So.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you very much for the answers. Thanks for the transparency. We're going to open it up. I think we've got about 5 or 10 minutes left that we saved for questions from the audience. And I believe the protocol is you walk up to the mic and town hall style ask your question. So maybe just if you jump onto the mic, you got a question, your name, company, and who your question's for.
Hi, my name is Mark. I work for York University, digital strategist. And my question is for Yona. You mentioned about optimizing for the final stage of the transaction. And that's increasingly, I guess, for you on a tablet. And one of the struggles that previous places I've worked at had is the lead up to that. And they've addressed different strategies, including data cookie, but the recognition was how important all that goes into that final stage is. So I'm wondering, like, how you address it, knowing like part of that is mobile, part of that is traditional. How does it work for you?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So attribution in the P&L, that was a really big challenge for me in my previous lives. So I was at Fido, I was at Saks, some place called ice.com, where we were kind of running a more traditional, what I would call version 1 of e-commerce, where all of your traffic is metered. So you really have to be careful about who you're paying and what you're paying, because every single time you're generating transaction, the vast majority of that traffic is brought to you by somebody else. And every time it's brought to you by somebody else, whether it's an ad network, a marketing campaign, or an affiliate, you got to pay somebody. And unfortunately, sometimes you're not paying the guy who actually helped generate the sale. There may be multiple steps. We kind of blew that up when we started the business. And we said that every single time, we're not going to worry about the last click, we're going to worry about the first click. So the way we built our systems when we first started was we created an attribution model on acquisition. So every single customer or member that comes in to be on the rack gets branded based on the channel that delivered them. So if they were delivered through air miles, or if they were delivered through Facebook, forever and a day, Facebook will be the channel that we attribute to that sale, and through the life cycle of that member. If we decide that we need to invest retention dollars to augment the lifetime value of that customer, so let's say it's a Facebook member that came in and we feel that, oh, there's a correlation with air miles, and that means we should be investing more dollars on the air mile side, then we'll make that decision, and we can test that. You can easily test that stuff by doing some multivariate testing. But the most important thing, because we have a member-based model, if you really look at Beyond the Rack, it's member-based really to please the analysts, you know, Jonah Hill. That's really what it's all about. Every single time, the reason we force you to register, it's free, right? So if you can enter in a search bar Beyond the Rack and invitation code, you're in. Wow, that was tough. It doesn't cost anything, but the fact that we can brand you with your UID with a source code allows us to track that, and that's been extraordinarily predictive. So we don't look at the last click, we look at the first click.
I love how Jonah Hill's come up a couple times in this conversation. I know it's a good panel when that happens. Any other questions from the audience? Don't be afraid, get up there. All right, I got more. So we talk about big bets for, obviously you made some big bets in 2012. You know, we talked about some of the success that you've had on Facebook and obviously some of the best brands that we've seen. When you're looking at 2013, where are you making your big bets for this year?
Go ahead, no.
The store we just opened on Yonge Street between Eglinton and Lawrence for Czech was a big bet. I mean, 140 screens, every one of them near field communication enabled. They're all touch enabled. In working with Samsung, like we're wired to be installing all their new stuff coming in, the bendable screens, everything. Finding a way to close the loop with the customer, so we know who the customer is on Facebook, we know who they are on Twitter, we know who they are on the email feed. Being able to close the loop at retail, and with the right permissions, being able to track how they shop the store, where they're stopping through the store, being able to engage any screen, go to customized offers. Most companies, even if that becomes available with NCF, they're not going to be able to do it until they install screens everywhere. So that model store is now the model for all flagships for Czech. And we're taking the best out of that and blowing it into Canadian Tire and Marks as well. So trying to figure out in 2013 how to be a year ahead of everyone and to be able to use Facebook as a primary channel to engage people in the store on all those screens now that we have them. That'll be a big bet for us.
For us, I think I would sum it up with three things: instant, data, and mobile. Instant is something that industry has talked about forever. Instantaneous value, instant gratification, things like that. In our business, we have the ability to make what you do at a point of sale at any one of our 200 different partners have an instant impact. So being able to see what happens immediately on your mobile, on your website, through a triggered message if appropriate. So trying to make our systems, which in some cases are all legacy systems, be more instantaneous is a big focus for us. Data and looking at big data and all the different sources of data and really trying to leverage that into a more context-rich and appropriate environment is a focus. And mobile is something that we are continuing to push forward on as well.
So we have two major strategic initiatives that are really kind of out there for us, but already showing tremendous amount of promise. And they both kind of come back, they triangulate around the same issue, which is leveraging infrastructure. So over the past 4 years as a company, we've not only built this nice off-price business, but we've also built infrastructure. So we have two huge facilities that ship 12,000 packages a day. We have relationships with 8.5 million consumers. We have this marketing layer. We have this technology layer. We have customer service. So we have all of this stuff, and we say, well, so how do you monetize this? How do you make more money out of these fixed assets? And the answer for us was twofold. One is expanding into other e-commerce verticals. E-commerce in Canada is so woefully under-penetrated versus the rest of the developed world. All you have to do look south of the border, and the core items we're selling in it, e-commerce penetration in the U.S. is 14% of bricks and mortar retail for soft goods. In Canada, it's 1.5%. I would suggest we've got some ways to go in terms of growing that. And we think that with all of this infrastructure, brand relationships, and customers, that there's an opportunity for us to leverage that and launch some full-price businesses. So we'll be getting into full-price retail in specific categories, and you'll see probably 2 of those businesses launch this year. The other thing, which is may be interested to some of the media people, the advertising people here, is we've started to leverage some of those relationships with our members, with those 8.5 million members, to provide like a closed loop marketing experience, online marketing experience to consumer packaged good companies and food companies. So we have a couple of pilot projects, one with Unilever, another one with Kellogg's that we recently ran, where we provide inbox sampling of product. And then we also provide, because we have the UIDs of who got sampled and what they got in their fulfillment, we can then follow those people around and provide a follow-up marketing campaign in social media, in traditional banner ads, that is highly focused against people who've had a physical interaction with your product. So as opposed to doing traditional sampling where you give out 100,000 samples at the CNE to anybody who's got a pulse, you can take a product that's highly targeted at a specific demographic, put a sample and a coupon that drives to retail in their hands, and then follow them around with a gazillion ad impressions specifically focused against that universe. We think that's a huge winner. I think that kind of changes the the paradigm for kind of consumer packaged goods companies online, because it kind of combines the physical with the ad impression, and that's a big project that we're working on with our friends at Facebook and some of our ad media players. But I think for us that represents a huge opportunity, and the early results that we've had, some of the tracking studies we've done on some of these programs, the results are out of control.
That's great. So last question, and then I think we're going to be out of time. So we talked about a lot of great things today. Obviously, the ROI question, I think, is the one that a lot of people asked, and I think you've given some great answers on kind of how you think about it and the fact that you've seen positive ROI from Facebook and from your social efforts. How do we take, for the people in the audience who are going to go back now to their agencies or their clients and be able to try to make social a bigger part of their 2013 plans? Any kind of parting advice on where they should be focused, or any key learnings that you've got that you can transfer over to help them in kind of making this a bigger year for social?
I would just say you have to, if the holdup is the C-suite, you have to engage the C-suite one by one by one, because they're all going to have different I found in our shop they all had a different perception or misperception of social. So doing one executive level presentation saying here's the plan, you're actually not solving any of your problems. But spending the time with each person and figuring it out, often starting with the CEO, then going to the CFO, and then going into the other lines. You have to make it contextual for them, and you have to show them the damage that brands can take on. And there's a few agencies out there that do great monitoring on social. You need to be able to show examples of brands taking massive damage online and position yourselves to. Sometimes you have to scare people into doing things if you can't motivate them into doing things.
Scare the C-suite. It's good. Emmie?
I think for people who are early days or want to increase their efforts, there's two things that are really important. One is getting a baseline and understanding, first off, what is the role of social for your business? What are the objectives for social? What do you want social to achieve for you? Because people approach it in very different ways. For us, when we started, we were looking at social as a way for us to connect consumers to consumers. So we have avid air miles collectors who are very engaged in the program and know absolutely how to optimize the program. And we're looking for ways to connect them to consumers who understood less or for them to share tips. And we really certainly saw that activity going on. We started looking at it very much in that way as a consumer to consumer perspective. But over time, and I think really probably driven as well by Facebook and the opportunities that are created through Facebook, it's been expanded to us being able to connect with consumers in their lives and in the right context for them. So I think it's important to think about what are you trying to achieve and then set up your activities against that. And then also, just some basics around, doing some research to see what kind of social activities your consumers are involved in, how might they welcome you into their social sphere, and doing some tests. It's very easy to do some tests that don't set you up for long-term commitments, so you can get some early learnings and optimize off of that.
Yeah, so I would agree with both of those perspectives. Test, and then test some more. Don't set yourself up by failure saying, here's the big project that's going to deliver $1 gazillion, because if you end the year with a clearer definition of how you're going to grow it incrementally next year, that's great. The other thing is, I think it's really important, and we went through this learning ourselves, is to recognize that social, in particular Facebook, is not a monologue. And anybody who's thinking about it is the way they think of a billboard ad or a TV spot or a flyer is missing the point. And we missed the point. So when we first stepped into Facebook, we said, oh, new advertising channel, let's apply the Google rules to Facebook and buy some ads. Oh boy, did we ever get killed. Like after the third day, I just wanted to shut the whole thing down. Like, how do we put this thing back in the box and close it and walk away? Because what we realized really quickly is that it was a dialogue. And Facebook represented for our customers, we were actually an intrusion to the dialogue that they were having with all of their friends. And so our customers viewed our presence on Facebook as an extension to our customer service department. So I would tell you right now internally at Beyond the Rack, and we learned this from the guys at Shoe Dazzle. They do this incredibly. We have 6 full-time people. We use a monitoring tool. That monitoring's not just Facebook, but all the other social spheres, responding online and monitoring these discussions. You can't shut them down. For us, Facebook is probably the most important barometer of customer satisfaction. We know when we've done something really wrong, when we start getting flamed. And we know that the problem has been mitigated when Facebook calms down, or when the voices of our supporters outnumber the voices of our detractors, because you always have that in any dialogue. So it's a very important barometer, and it's Tim Hortons. You really want to have a seat at the table when people are having a conversation about your brand. And for us, Facebook, as much as anything else, is an insight into that, and I think that's the easiest sell. It's the best focus group you'll ever have.
Well, I think it's interesting. I was just thinking about some of the themes that kind of came out as you were talking, and the answers that you've given today. It seems like obviously test and learn is one that everybody talked about, making sure that you try a bunch of things. You're not going to know what works unless you put it out there. Hire Jonah Hill if he's available. It seems like is a
Clone
good clone. Get somebody who knows the data and kind of can figure that out and measure the ROI and start to look at the benefit and scare the C-suite. Seems like now we talked about, but obviously engaging people in the conversation, walking them through what it can do is obviously a really important thing that came out as well. So I think we're out of time. Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for participating. Obviously great stories. Hopefully it was helpful for everybody here. And thank you for Edward for having us.